Self-critique is incredibly important in your process. Otherwise, you're just kind of making stuff and putting out there and you don't really care what the outcome is, what it's supposed to look like, or even if it makes sense. So it's always really important to kind of have critique in your mind as you go along with projects. When I was in school and we would have critiques, it was more kind of about concept and really pushing your concept and just kind of like nitpicking what was working and what wasn't in terms of like color or layout. When I graduated and I started working on my own, it became even more important to take those skills to the next level. Because even when I'm working with an art director, I can't always depend on them to point out things that are gonna look weird. Sure, they can point out little things that they would agree on and, you know, this doesn't sell or this doesn't read well. But in terms of what a letter is supposed to look like and whether a letter is looking wonky, that's something that's really not their job to do. So it's up to you to make sure that you're being careful and pointing out those mistakes ahead of time. So it's always important to do self-critique from the very start to the end of a project. Self-critique is really scary. It can be hard to admit if you've done a project wrong or that something looks off on the drawing because, you know, you're looking at your project and you think it's great. And I've definitely done the same thing where it's like, there's nothing wrong with this drawing. I'm gonna keep going and do my thing without really looking at it with a critical eye. So the way you can kind of train your eye is, I think, community is a big thing, sharing your projects with other people and having them give their honest opinion. One way you can think about doing self-critique on your own is basically sleeping on it. You finish a project, don't send it off to the client right away, don't send it to the printers or however you finish up your project, don't post it on Instagram. Just wait a night, look at it with a fresh eye. That will help train the way you look at it. Just basically just being aware that you're looking at your project critically rather than everything I do is awesome, which I'm sure it is, but it's also important to be critical about your work. I have 5 flags that I always look for in my work when I'm self-critiquing: awkward letter forms, mismatched styles, unbalanced composition, style mismatched to concept, and extraneous drop shadows, swashes, and details. Awkward letter forms occur when it's either squished in the composition, we either went too far stylistically and tried something that is just making the letter not readable, or just kind of not working. So we're gonna look at a couple examples from my work in terms of awkward letter forms. This was a project I did, and this is actually not the printed version because my art director correctly corrected this awkward letter form. So I have this W where I was just trying to do this extra swash that kind of like went back into itself. But after discussing it with the art director, we decided to just keep the W really simple, and this is where it ended up. And I think that is a much better solution. It's really important to fix awkward letter forms because they're really distracting in the composition. Your eye goes directly to it and it just kind of looks like there's something wrong with it, whether it's drawn incorrectly or you're trying to do extraneous kind of swashes or something, or if it's squished in the composition. It's really important that each letter is legible and looks right in the composition. Another flag to look out for is mismatched styles. There's nothing wrong with mixing and matching styles. I think it can make a layout look more energetic and have more concept to it. But it also, if you're pairing different styles together and they just don't fit, it's gonna make the composition look very strange. If you're unsure about mixing styles, maybe try starting out simple and adding on to it as you go along. It's important to consider styles working together like a family. If you want to add some cousins to the mix, like that could fit very well. Very simple style, sans serif mixed with a very simple serif, or even a simple script, that could work. But if you start mixing 2 very disparate styles together, it's not going to really fit and it's going to look really awkward. Having a balanced composition is very important when you're lettering work. If your eye goes straight to one word and all the other letters are like crammed in there and doesn't really have a sense of importance, it's going to affect the way the reader looks at it. This quote that I did, the quote is really long, but the biggest word on there is candy, where I feel like we could have been adding more emphasis to other words. This one, the layout is a little stronger, but there's some issues where the word "the" is just kind of crammed in there very awkwardly, where I could have used the space better. And using the space in terms of layout is really important, and that's what you want to focus on when you're creating your compositions. Here we're going to talk about style mismatched to concept. It's also really important to create mood boards. This is when mood boards become incredibly important when you're putting your piece together. That way, from start to finish, you can always refer back to your mood board to make sure you're on the right path. So a couple of pieces of mine that I feel like the concept could have been tighter to the style. The idea is that it was meant to look like a soda pop bottle top. And I feel like the style kind of went a little bit more Victorian. And at the time, I was really inspired by Victorian style lettering, but that doesn't necessarily mean because it's something you're really into at the moment, a project comes along that you have an idea for and it's not matching up, then you kind of need to let it go. You'll do Victorian style lettering on some other project. Maybe I should have been looking more at like retro, kind of slick, more mid-century modern kind of style lettering. While I still really like this piece because I think the lettering is fun, it just doesn't match up with the style. In this other example, these are sketches that I had presented for an editorial project. The project was for Atlanta CSA, so that was the headline, and this is the concept that they went with. And I feel they didn't go with this concept because it's like a farmer's market that kind of style, but it really looks futuristic. And I think that's what she was referring to when she went with this piece, which is clearly referencing those vegetable food crates. And so conceptually, this sketch made a lot more sense for the final than this one where it was kind of loose and really not understanding where I was kind of heading with that concept. Adding drop shadows, swashes, and details to your lettering work can help support your concept. But if you're adding extraneous drop shadows, swashes, and details, it can water down your concept and just make your lettering and composition look busy. So these are a couple examples of my work where I feel like the extraneous details and swashes was really hurting my lettering work. So these were some sketches that I had presented for a book cover, and none of these concepts were chosen because I feel like I went a little over the top with the details. In this example, there's so many really fine details where Monsoon looks so light compared to English. So as a book cover where readability is incredibly important, it was kind of hard to differentiate the two words, and kind of Monsoon was getting lost in the composition. In this one, the lettering and the swashes are all the same weight, so nothing was really called out. And sometimes you can kind of get away with that, but if you're not making it a point in your pencil sketches to make sure that the swashes are going to be more into the background and the lettering going to come forward, it's going to be kind of hard to really let that get across in your pencil sketches. And this one, I just feel like the border is probably way too busy compared to the more simple style lettering. So this is the example that I use that I'm going to be fixing some of the issues that we talked about. I'm working on a light pad. I have a printout of my old lettering and a sheet of paper that I'm going to be using to redraw it. So at this stage, I kind of just want to get the basic layout down, because the layout I'm not as concerned about. It's just some of the things like reworking the way the lettering works in the layout and addressing some of those issues like this S here, and just some of the spacing and style of birthday. But that's pretty much it. I'm pretty happy with the border, so we're going to be kind of focusing more on just the lettering itself. So right off the bat, I'm noticing and now it's just pretty big, and it really doesn't need to be that big. And just for your is something that I'd probably want to call out more. So I'm just going to lightly going right on top of that lettering, just basically make and now a little bit more spaced out and a little simpler. Like, it doesn't need a drop shadow. It doesn't need that much attention to it. I have these little florets on the sides. Maybe it doesn't even need that, and I could just do some like small, simple dashes. The banners, I feel like they're kind of awkward. I don't really like the way it just barely touches the banner for birthday, so maybe that's something I'm gonna also address. Just basically have it work a little bit more organically in the composition. So now that I'm pretty much focused on looking at this piece more critically and I'm already noticing new things, it might be a good idea to kind of go back in and start making notes of things that you wanted to address early on. That way you don't forget those issues as well. So if you're working on a large sheet of paper like I am here, you can kind of just make notes on the side, or you can make it on your original printout. So I'm just gonna quickly like S, and just kind of make these really small kind of notes, like the second one and the third one need to be changed. So I'm gonna continue fixing this border, just try and make that curve a little smoother. Anytime you have curves, angles, you want to make sure that the curves are smooth, the angles are parallel. It looks like the angle, like stupendous, it actually looks like that curve is pretty well done. It's just the way the lettering works in it that isn't working and making it look awkward. And again, as you go along, you just kind of notice things that it's like, oh, why did you even do that in the first place? Like 4 is so tiny, whereas like this is all kind of small. It's probably better for readability just to keep them all the same size. Because sometimes you change the sizes too often, it just really ends up making it look messy, rather than just spending more time and detail on the words that are good, like birthday, magnificent, and stupendous. So I'm going to quickly kind of just rough in the angles that I do like and do think are working. And I think at this stage it's probably better to just kind of get the format and put the guides in, and basically because I have so many banners and everything's kind of on a curve, it's probably better to get those down first, and that can be really helpful when you're working on your lettering anyway, just to make sure that everything's spaced out right, and then you can fit the lettering into the layout as you see fit. So I pretty much just filled in the banners and where the lettering goes, and now I can kind of see what is going to fit better. One of the things I really wanted to change was the way the one and only fit into this space down here, because I still want attention to it, but in the original layout I feel like it just kind of felt really crammed in there and didn't have the same energy as everything else on the page, on the layout. Also, it can be really beneficial to work on several different sheets of paper, because if you're satisfied with the way the banners and the guides are working, you can also throw another sheet of paper on top of that, not using the original layout, and now you're working off the guides that you had set down. So when you don't have the original layout to use as reference, you're kind of not so much starting from scratch, but you have the layout, and now you can really fix the lettering rather than going back and like maybe this A, the counterform here is a little small, and maybe the C and the E are a little close here. And you can really start to notice these things more. And now I can kind of feel more confident to move forward with a fresher eye. So now that I have my layout in, I'm going to start putting the lettering in really lightly so I can make adjustments as I go along. Okay, so I'm getting to the point where I'm trying to find where the is going to fit in best. And obviously the swash of the S isn't helping anybody. So I think I'd really like to just kind of keep it simple, just like the above magnificent. Oh, and I forgot the exclamation point. Always remember grammar. Okay. And now that I'm not going to have the giant swash of this S kind of interfering with it, it can kind of just live here pretty simply rather than calling so much attention to it. But now if I do want to make the S bigger, because I do think that could be fun, it doesn't need to be so thick and bold and kind of stand out from the rest of the word. So I have my layout, and I can kind of just see it really lightly without using the light pad, and sometimes that keeps the drawing a little bit more flexible.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe to stay up to date on all of our latest videos.